Welcome, everyone. Thank you to our webinar today on Protect, Prevent, Respond, Strengthening Our Role Against Human Trafficking. My name is Christine Commerce. I am the Program Director for the Alliance to End Human Trafficking. We are a national nonprofit organization founded by Catholic sisters dedicated to focus on education and awareness, advocacy, as well as supporting our member houses who provide direct services to survivors. So we are recording our webinar today. You will receive a copy of the recording and feel free to share it and spread the message further. I will go ahead and introduce Ruby, who will be my counterpart today. Ruby Peters has been a dedicated advocate for social justice and human trafficking awareness for more than a decade, educating communities, parishes, schools, and young people throughout Northeast Florida. A passionate leader in prevention and education, she has helped develop innovative resources to empower youth and connect individuals with information. Her commitment to combining faith, service, and advocacy has been recognized with the 2024 Law and Spirituality Award and the Northeast Florida Human Trafficking Coalition 2025 Eileen Jacob Memorial Award. So today, for those of you who are joining us, I know typically we do a panel discussion. Today we're doing it a little bit different. We will be sharing a PowerPoint presentation as part of our training, and I am going to kick us off with some information about human trafficking in general, and then Ruby will be leading us in some of the ways that it happens and how to identify traffickers and some of the signs to look for and so forth. So we can all agree that a safe learning environment is imperative to overall student success. And this success is sacrificed on a campus when there is exploitation or violence. And research has shown a correlation between human trafficking and of children and school-related problems, including learning disabilities. So all members of a school campus, along with parents and community partners, must have a commitment to this work to protect victims and prevent crimes. This collaboration is critically important to student success and will lead to a safer, healthier school culture. So when you think of the term human trafficking, I want you to think if this could be a problem in your school. So I know a lot of times we think of the movie Taken, or we may have seen Sound of Freedom. So we may have a particular idea of what trafficking looks like. I did a training with Catholic school, high school principals, and I asked this question of how many thought this issue could affect their students. Out of the 60 principals, only a few raised their hand. When I was done with my presentation, there were still a few that didn't raise their hand. And I heard someone say, well, these students have money, and so they're not at risk for trafficking. What I didn't share was that I went to Catholic school my entire life. I came from a middle class family, but we didn't have much money. And once I learned about this issue, I realized how fortunate I was, and how many times my situation could have ended up very differently. So, a survivor once said that the only difference between victims and everyone else is luck. And in my case, that was definitely very true. And we're going to share some of the ways that traffickers will tend to target vulnerabilities. So these are some of the things that I mentioned earlier that we focus on education awareness. A lot of times people think that we provide direct services, but we actually provide scholarship money to survivors so they can continue on with their education. This is what I like to think I do. And then this is what we really do, is really education, awareness, prevention, advocacy work. So these are some of the topics that we are going to cover today that I mentioned. So who the traffickers are, how to spot a suspected trafficking victim, How does technology and social media play a role? What are some of the signs, and how should we report or respond? So these are some of the common misconceptions when it comes to human trafficking, that it's just illegal prostitution, the victims are only girls or women, it's inflicted by pimps, I know what they look like, I don't really know anyone who's victim. Traffickers only target those who are poor from other countries, and this is really not happening in my school, and it's only happening through kidnapping or physical force. So when we talk about human trafficking, it needs to include force, fraud, or coercion. And that force includes physical restraint, physical harm, sexual assault, beatings, confinement, often used in the very beginning stages of that victimization to break down that victim's resistance. And then there's fraud. Oh, don't want to show that video yet. But then there's fraud, which includes false promises regarding employment. It can be for love. It can be for a better life. And then there's unexpected changes in that work condition or that compensation agreement or the nature of the relationship. And then we talk about coercion includes threats. So it's threats of serious harm to an individual. It could be to share pictures. It could include psychological manipulation and reporting to authorities or sharing those pictures with family members and friends, or substance abuse. Now, legally, it's important to note that if it is a minor under the age of 18, they do not need to prove that force, fraud, or coercion. They should not be charged as criminals if they are arrested. And if they're being prostituted, they actually need to receive services, and they are considered a victim of human trafficking if anything of value is being traded for those sexual acts. So let's take a look at what really human trafficking looks like with this first video.
What we have. And I was like, what do we have? And she's like, your body. We didn't know about sex trafficking. That's all I was going to know. Your blood. Gotta get used to it. Like, anything that goes around. See, organs. Yeah.
Really believed that she was getting ready to be sold. Brianna from a small town, was an A student, did everything your daughter would do.
To become a nurse while I was in high school, I had found a waitressing job. I love school. I love being around my friends, and my science class was like my big thing.
These traffickers or pimps, they pretend to be an older boyfriend, and these young girls actually fall in love with these guys and believe that this guy loves them back.
I was like 24. He played football at university. Designer jeans and things. Go to like movies and malls, trips, stuff like that. He bought me a dress and some jewelry because like I didn't really have stuff like that.
It's important for the pimp or the trafficker to separate these girls from their family and their friends.
He really gave me the courage to kind of stand up to my mom. He was like, just kind of keep it on the down low.
One day he asks for something, and she doesn't want to do it. She's so worried about losing him that she will. And once he's had her do it once, he pretty much can control her from then on.
He kept saying that he needed money. I was like, I'll help you or whatever. I made a choice that night, but I found out that he actually had trusted me.
So, human trafficking includes forced labor as well as sex trafficking, and this is the fastest growing criminal industry in the world. It is second only to the illegal drug trade and has surpassed the illegal gun trade. And according to the US Department of State, there are almost 30 million people in labor and sex trafficking. However, according to the International Labor Organization and Global Slavery Index, that number is as high as 50 million, with 22 million in forced and child marriages, which is still legal in many states in our country. And so, what you'll see is with statistics, there's really no great statistics out there. A lot of different agencies may report different statistics depending on their reporting mechanisms. It's important to note that it doesn't matter if there's really 30 million, 50 million, one person who is being trafficked is one too many. So when traffickers tend to target those who are most vulnerable, they can target anyone of all age. And the average age for entry for children targeted and trafficked in for the commercial sex trade is between 11 and 14 years of age in the United States. And often it's because victims are experiencing an extreme sense of hopelessness. So we see some of the vulnerabilities here, whether it's low self-esteem, they could be unsupervised, they're lonely, they have weak support structures, they have a need to belong or beloved. One former Polaris client said, "You will do anything to feel like his everything." And he promises you everything. And the things that he convinces you to do, they don't seem that bad if, after all, your profits meet expectations. And then you've got what you've always wanted your whole life, love. So are we giving the kids the love, attention, the trust and validation that they need so they're not seeking it from someone else? So then we see that there's also kids who are lost, abused, low income. And we see sometimes too that labor trafficking happens with our youth as well, especially in low income areas. So in one particular case, there was a group called Teens Against Drugs and Alcohol. And it sounded like a great way for parents to keep their kids off the streets. They would tell them, hey, your kids can learn valuable job skills. They can earn a trip to Busch Gardens. And what they found was that, in fact, that these kids were spending 12 hours on the streets, either selling trinkets from door to door or magazines under the guise of a fundraiser. Sometimes it's candy from a dollar store. And in this particular case, they were taken outside their county. They were gone from as early as 7 a.m., sometimes not returning to midnight. They were taken into unsafe neighborhoods with registered sex offenders. Food and water were limited. The girls were told to pull their bras out from their chest to see if they were hiding any money. They would have to pay for their water. They didn't have access to bathrooms, so they would have to ask people to go into their homes to use the restrooms. And in this case, they didn't even have access to seatbelts. They were sitting on plywood benches. They had to sit on each other's laps. And it was one concerned resident who said, okay, something's not right here. They asked some questions and they called authorities. And that's when these individuals were charged with labor trafficking of these youth and teens. And so if you see a scenario like this, it's definitely always best to ask questions. If they're not obviously in a school environment, maybe where they go to school, that's a red flag if they're outside their school district. If they are, you know, you don't want to necessarily invite them in, but you can offer them a drink of water and try to get some more information as far as, you could say you have a daughter, granddaughter, grandson, another student that might be interested in doing what they're doing. So what is what is the contact information? Or if there's a van nearby, could you get their license plate? And then you can always report to authorities. And then we see that a large majority of kids who end up being trafficking victims are also in foster care. And then this also happens to children who may have some delays and so forth when it comes to being able to make the best decisions when it comes to meeting people online and in person. So here is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Traffickers actually use this as a training tool to identify what their victims' needs may be, and then they would use that to exploit it. So for $9.95, you can download Pimpology on the Amazon on how to be a successful pimp. So there are no age restrictions. It is written by a pimp. Includes the 48 laws of pimping. From what I've been told, if there's any English teachers out there, it's not well written. But law number 17 is get yourself a bottom girl. They're the ones who will do the work for you. Or okay, to be a boy. And they're the ones that are going to do some of the grooming and recruitment right there in your schools. So traffickers will look at what those vulnerabilities are, and then that's what they will use to manipulate them and start that grooming process. So it could be meeting their physical needs, it could be meeting their emotional needs. They could take them on shopping sprees, isolate them from their friends, or even introduce them to drugs. So let's take a look at this next video and see if we can identify what were some of those vulnerabilities in the girls in this video.
Nobody chooses wakes up one day and says, listen, I think I want to sleep with people from learning. When I was being sold, it was so much. Some days it feels like would have 4 different things in a day. When I first was with my driver, he pulled me off the street. So I didn't have he taught me to know, drugged me, so I was like content, vulnerable, and happy. I ended up owing him for for the drugs. I was not allowed to hold my money because they trap you. I was the girl that thought it would never happen. It doesn't happen to captains, the cheerleading squad. That doesn't happen to students with a 4.0 GPA. And it does.
So we see in the first survivor story that the trafficker was meeting some of those physiological needs, right? And then we see that, yeah, she had a 4.0 GPA and she was captain of the cheerleading team. So where do you think her vulnerabilities were? It could have been that she was looking for love and belonging, or maybe she had low self-esteem. So I did this training at Catholic Charities once, and one of my former coworkers had come up to me and she shared that her granddaughter had low self-esteem and she was targeted by another high school teen who was addicted to drugs and was recruiting other teens into trafficking. And so he recognized that she had that low self-esteem and then was using that to groom her. And like the last survivor we saw, she said, I never thought that this could happen to the all-American family. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Ruby.
Thank you, Christine. And I'm hearing you quite clearly, but it could be my computer. The videos are a little bit muffled for some reason.
Okay, we'll try
But
to
I
visit.
do, this is a wonderful display of the comments that predators use online all the time in order to reassure people, to offer love, comfort, belonging, self-esteem, whatever they think that person needs, because they're expert people at identifying a need and then trying to fill it. Please remember that people who groom rarely look dangerous. They're usually helpful or sometimes trusted people that you know, and sometimes even charming. And that's why grooming works. So predators pose with these fake profiles and build a great rapport with kids or adults, actually. But and they're going to go look for shared interests, and some call it sex fishing, and that's fishing with a PH. It's important to note that online grooming and recruitment can happen in both sex and labor trafficking as well. And sometimes I've talked to some teenagers and they call comments like this their rant accounts. Those are gold for a predator. The victims tend to want to take a little risk. They're expressing frustration, whatever. They might be mad at their mom that day, and just explain that their life sucks or whatever it is. So anytime a predator sees that, it's an open invitation, unless there's parental controls on those, to comment and to offer consolation. And especially we want to note that kids who are finding a lack of success at school and the resulting sense of lack of self-worth may make some of those students even more vulnerable, in addition to whatever's going on in their daily lives. Slide. Can you get the next one, please?
Yes.
So while girls are often trafficked by a pimp or intimate partner, boys are sometimes trafficked through something called survival sex, um, or buyer perpetrated sex. And women and girls are by far the higher percentage of sex trafficking victims, but men and boys are often victimized in similar ways, same kind of grooming, um, and we just assume that not something's not going on. All right, we're switching slides.
Sorry.
That's okay. So traffickers tend, as I said, to go for those most vulnerable people, which there's a long list of those. Slide. So this is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children estimate that 300 children in the U.S. Are victims of commercial sex every year. It's truly a very high risk thing. That abuse is even more prevalent in children who have already been suffering some kind of child abuse at home. And so the average age of a runaway, according to NCMEC, is just between 12 and 14. Predators are really good at identifying those people, and it's often said that within minutes, or actually within 2 days is what their statistic is, that they can identify a runaway and offer them the survival sex, whatever they need, a meal, a bed, some financial help. So it's all of those things that get these kids who are literally out there seeking something else because they think their life is so bad. And also remember that abused children don't see themselves as abused because what they're suffering at home is their norm. And I was once giving a talk at a sixth grade, a junior high group, and I was talking about familial trafficking, and a light bulb went on in this. You could just see her face change when I was talking about familial trafficking, because that's all these kids know. So escaping to somewhere else may seem like a better idea. And while I could not have time because of class changes to talk to that girl, I did certainly say to the teacher, keep an eye on that young lady, because I don't know if she identified with something herself or if she was hearing a familiar situation. But children bring their home life with them sometimes, and sometimes they are very good at hiding what's happening. So it's teachers, I admire you so much, certainly because you're there so long and takes the stamina of an 8-hour day, but also because you have the opportunity to see in things that other people who may just be a short part of a child's life, but your length of time with those children really give you an expert eye at looking at things that are unusual. A throwaway in this term is a kid who has been kicked out of his house. So it might be because he's expressing difficulty with identifying his sexuality, but it could just be because he got kicked out of the house. So those are, I hate to think of anybody in this life as a throwaway, but that's kind of what they're called. And of course, kids who are loners, we always are concerned about the kid who doesn't have a posse. They don't have a friend group, and they kind of fly solo all the time. So just keep an extra eye on those. I know you probably already are. Slide. So this is the Polaris heat map. And that Polaris heat map is indicating that human trafficking happens in every state in our union, all 50. Traffickers hang out at malls. You can start the list, please, Christine. Targeting, sometimes one girl just said, oh, this guy said, you have such pretty eyes, I could make you a model. And I said, and the answer to that is, thank you, and keep on walking, because if you want to be a model, you can find a modeling agency. But they'll always look for people and know within 30 seconds if they make eye contact with a victim, if they're going to be if they're a kid who has who's going to be manipulated, or if there's a kid who's confident and is going to keep walking. So always encourage kids to not fall for any promises of what sounds like attractive offers. It could be a gaming bucks or any of those kind of things. Their traffickers are just super good by frequenting locations that kids congregate. So that is those malls and schools and train and bus stations, but even group homes, they find the most vulnerable and then pick on them even more. Traffickers love college campuses, especially during the first few weeks, because those new students are in unfamiliar surroundings. They're looking to make new friends and have new experiences, and they may be away from home for the first time, so they're even a little bit more vulnerable. And of course, we have sporting events, all those large events, Super Bowls, you hear a lot of publicity about, but it's any kind of large gathering, whether that's a professional event or a college event. Even the TPC. Heck, there was even human trafficking at WrestleMania. So the traffickers view large crowds as opportunities. And with the advent of the internet, it's a lot less effort. So traffickers can recruit through social media, through gaming sites, and even online chat rooms. Those advertising, the appointments and payments can all be done online. So are we showing that video, Christine?
Yeah.
Got time?
It seems to be a problem with the sound on this one. So apologies, we'll skip that one.
We'll skip, right.
Yeah, but
But
I'll just share Alicia's story real quick. Alicia met someone online. So we see a lot of this happening with trafficking right now, is that kids are meeting someone online, they think they're their friend, and they agree to meet up with them. In her particular case, she just steps outside her door on Thanksgiving between dinner and dessert, and he basically threw her in the back of his trunk. So when these kids are meeting up with these individuals, they find that they're either much older or not who they promised to be. And so then in those particular cases, that's when they are taken from their homes and transported to other locations where they may not be as familiar with where they are or the city that they are in.
mm-hmm. And traffickers are still they are at physical places where kids hang out, but they can reach hundreds of kids online versus just a few kids in person. So online has truly become the white van of the world. It's during the pandemic, those first two little parts of the graph on the left, we were so shocked in 2020 to learn that online enticement, which I'll explain in a little bit, those reports had almost doubled in the first 6 months of the pandemic. And that was attributed to predators who were taking advantage of the many children who were online, who were often unsupervised and sometimes lonely, and they were enticing them to use their computer to produce sexually explicit material. So now look at the right side of the graph, because those numbers look like a drop in the bucket when we see that last year there was over 1.4 million online enticement reports. John Sheehan, who's the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children Senior Vice President, he oversees the Exploited Children Division, and he said these alarming statistics are a wake-up call. These statistics are not just numbers. They represent children experiencing unthinkable harm. We need parents, caregivers, educators, and communities to stay alert and talk openly with children about online tasks. This jump of 2025 was partially due to the increase that platforms are now required, they're mandatory reporters, so they are required to report those suspicious things. And it also is partially because AI has become so prevalent in use by predators. So the online enticement official definition is any individual that's communicating with someone believed to be a child via the internet with the intent to commit a sexual offense. So that includes sextortion, which most of you know is a sext. And that, of course, is a picture of a body part that should be under a bathing suit. But that picture is sent via texting, thus the name sexting. So societal norms have shifted, and a teenage girl actually told me that sexting is just another way of flirting. It's no big deal. And I assured her that it is a big deal because in the state of Florida, and it does vary state by state, so check your laws in the state you're in. But here in Florida, it's illegal for a minor to have a sext on their phone. And even if a sext is sent to someone who's a romantic partner this week, and so you're voluntarily doing that, if that breakup occurs, there's a thing called revenge porn. And that person is now publicly sharing those sexts in order to humiliate and embarrass a former partner. So I always tell kids, nothing good can come of sending any of those kind of pictures. So those predators online can be posing as a romantic interest, but their goal is always either financial exploitation or their own sexual satisfaction, or sometimes now we are seeing a sadistic side to this. An FBI agent once told me recently that a gang in Nigeria is called the Yahoo Boys, and they're targeting mainly teen boys for sextortion. And sadly, there's been several dozen deaths attributed to the sextortion of young men. So sadistic online exploitation is one of, I think, the most disturbing types of online enticement. They're nihilistic extremist groups, or NVEs. And some of you may have heard about a 764 network. They target kids who are on any publicly available messaging platform, like Discord, and games like Roblox. Any really where there's an open chat room, because initially offenders are going to befriend them and initiate that online relationship, which they're so good at. But then they force their young targets to record live stream acts of harm, either against themselves or against others, or sometimes even a pet. So NVE's goal is not sexual gratification. It is not even financial. It's content. And they want to brag about having and being the worst of the worst. One mother told National Center that a violent group member made her daughter cut his we're saying it's because we don't know if it was a male or female, its screen name on her arm with a razor blade, and then told her that she was a good girl and that they loved her. So that mom could not believe that her daughter's response was, "I love you too." They're totally controlling. Slide. So, of identified victims, by the great majority were first recruited online. And whether that was social media, look at the stats on Facebook, Insta, and Snapchat, could be on a gaming site, could be on just a chat room. But these adolescents are targeted and seen as the easy mark. And of course, they're eventually asked for some kind of sexually explicit photos in order for the predator to then use their response. Slide. So I don't know about you, but I was super excited this morning to see headlines that said Meta was settling a child safety suit. It was welcome to me. So, in addition to an $18 billion settlement, they denied wrongdoing, but are promising sweeping changes like, and these are just some of the things in the list, a 2-hour daily time limit for users on its apps for people under 18, reduced notifications during school hours of 8 to 3, hiding the tally of likes, because we all know how important it is to get those likes on our posts, and having absolute downtime from midnight to 6 a.m. Unfortunately, they're limiting payment of the settlement, according to that newspaper article, unless YouTube and TikTok also make similar changes. But I personally am very optimistic, and I think it's really the beginning of holding platforms accountable because they have all the cards. Sex traffickers are using social media to just literally, that's their business model. So all of these are lots of different acts. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. We used WhatsApp when my daughter lived in Australia to make free phone calls. There's a lot. YouTube was used last week in this household to figure out how to put a garbage disposal in. There's so many positive things about apps, but there's also, it's not really the app sometimes, it's the way predators use the app. And we've all heard probably a billion stories about Roblox and the negatives of that. Slide. So who are these traffickers? Well, a lot of them are people that you pass by every day on the street and would never suspect anything. As I said, groomers and traffickers are initially people you trust sometimes, or people who have wheedled their way into your into your life in one way or another. Is this where the slide that feeds?
Yes.
The point of this slide is they look like the people next door, but all of these people in this slide were human traffickers in some way or another. And look, Jeffrey Epstein isn't among them even. Sometimes they can be any age, they can be any race, they can be any profession. But all of these, and of course with labor trafficking, they can be many different varieties of things. So there was even a grandmother who was threatening her 13-year-old granddaughter and selling her for sex to a boyfriend. There's the actress who was running a human trafficking ring. There was a 13-year-old boy who was pimping out two 12-year-old girls at an affluent school, making them engage in either oral sex or hand jobs. These traffickers are in it for themselves, and they strip all dignity away from their victims and force them into situations that nobody would think of when they woke up in the morning. So traffickers sometimes put girls in schools and tell them to recruit other girls maybe to a party that weekend. And if that's the bottom girl, if she's successful, then she might see a nice reward. But if she's not successful, she may suffer some consequences. So that's an instance of what's called forced criminality, where the victim then becomes a victimizer. Slide. Oh, our risk factors. Well, just slide down. It's seen so many victims have said they were victims of sexual abuse as children. And that was before any trafficking even came into it. The people who are bullied, who are just finding themselves online a lot, people who are lonely, are people who are already in pornography, or traffickers are now using porn to normalize what they're asking their victims to doing. So pornography is both a gateway to victims and to the people who are paying for a sex act. Some trafficking victims are just looking for an escape from a situation that they're in. Maybe it could be war, or some kind of type of violence. And of course, if you're an immigrant or migrant, there's always the chance that you have a language barrier, or that you don't know the laws of our country, and that makes you even more vulnerable. People who are uh, financial issues are always people who are vulnerable, but natural disasters also can cause vulnerability, because if you're the person who's just had their house wiped out by a hurricane, of course and depending on your financial status, you may be desperate for help. But it's also have been known, sex traffickers, to take their stable to where all of those people are parked, because the people who come to help us in our disasters are the electricians, they're the tree cutters, they're the contractors, and traffickers are thinking they can provide. These guys are away from home because they are mostly men, but they are being offered sexual services because they're away from home. Who's going to find out? So those natural disasters that was a real surprise for me when I first started doing this work. And as I said, those who are abused at home, which are 80-90% of victims who've already been previously abused, are just put in the super vulnerable sign. I think on an earlier slide, I missed mentioning we have the intellectual and developmentally disabled people. They can maybe be more easily talked into things, but they're also trafficked for their Social Security income. So it's financial as well as having another person. A person for a trafficker is cash in the bank, because they don't care what you look like, how big you are. They know that a person that they can manipulate is how they are going to make their income. Slide. Or do we have a video there?
We're getting close to time, so
Okay.
all
right.
Yeah,
so these are things for you, our wonderful teachers, to be cognizant of, because when grades start declining, someone who's got inconsistent stories, people who start missing school, drugs are often involved with trafficking, because that's a method of control for the trafficker. So, people who are starting to come possibly looking like there's either drug equipment with their stuff, or if they're in some kind of altered state, they might have a lot of cash or no cash, depending on their trafficker. So it's just a matter of who's controlling the funds right then. They might show up with expensive, new jackets or purses. They are often encouraged to lie about their age and definitely have fake IDs. And of course, they don't trust any law enforcement or anything because they're told not to. Traffickers often give their victims a cell phone just for the purpose of contacting them. So if you see a kid with multiple cell phones, that's kind of unusual. And of course, these are often seen as older boyfriends or girlfriends. And if you overhear a conversation about a kid traveling a lot on weekends, and it isn't for those travel soccer teams or basketball teams. Those are all kinds of things that are indicators and suspicious and just red flags, something to keep an eye on. Injuries, signs of abuse, especially things that are like non-accidental, burns, cutting, things of self, items of self-abuse, all of those things are big red flags. And then these kids is if there's a major change in their character or their interests. If sometimes the kid will just start being sullen and quiet, and that's something to take note of as well. Slide. Oh, yes, and the branding. So traffickers sometimes encourage or not encourage, they require a tattoo, which they're saying is because they love them so much and they want them to have this tattoo. But it's often a tattoo of a dollar sign or a crown or the guy's name or the woman's name, because not all pimps are men, remember, can be anybody. But that brand, then that tattoo then reminds that person every single day of their status in life. And then it also can remind, if depending on where they are, it is a signal to other traffickers that this is someone's property. So don't mess with this person because she's already claimed. Next. There we go. Take it away, Christine.
Thank you, Ruby. So, what can we do as educators or as school personnel if we notice some of the signs? Definitely, you want to use your school resources and follow your school's protocol. School counselors have specialized training if a possible victim is identified. So, these are just some examples of things that you may want to do at your school level on how to address any potential trafficking situations. And then fill in the blank. Is there anything on here that you feel is missing that should be added? Now, legally, if you suspect a child's safety, health, or welfare is endangered, you must report it. But please be aware that the parents or legal guardians could also be traffickers. And I did hear of a case once where the little boy was being trafficked by his family. He did report to school personnel, and unfortunately, in that particular case, they did go to the parents and express their concerns. And what happened was that little boy got taken away for that weekend and was so violently abused that he never came forward and told anyone after that for a really long time. So please be aware that you really don't know who the traffickers are. So I know that can sometimes make conversations with parents a little difficult. Sometimes it could be the caregiver. So if there's a child, often they're referred to as Restavik children coming from Haiti, where they're, maybe going to school, but they're being forced into domestic servitude at home, and oftentimes with family members. And we see this also with children maybe promised a certain education. They come here to the United States. They may be with a family member or a friend of the family, and then they're either being labor or sometimes sex trafficked as well. And there was a story of an 8-year-old girl here in Central Florida. It really was a teacher who noticed that something was off with her, started asking her questions, was concerned. And after having a conversation, she eventually found out that this 8-year-old girl had been trafficked by her uncles for 2 years since she was 6 years old. So these are just some of the resources. You can put the number for the National Human Trafficking Hotline in your phone number. It's also an easy way to remember 888-3737, 888. You can report anonymously. You can also contact the cyber tip line. There is also a texting option and a web chat option as well. And of course, if there's ever an emergency, you would want to call 911, and you can also call the child abuse hotline if you notice some issues of human trafficking in your community. So teachers and administrators are mandatory reporters in all 50 states, and knowingly not according in the state of Florida, at least, if you're not reporting child abuse, you could have some personal liability. You can also have your teaching certificate withdrawn. There's also investigation for the Department of Education. There's possible criminal charges. It's also a third-degree felony that could result in 5 years in prison and $5,000 fine. So a lot of times people don't want to report because they're not sure. And it's not always your job to determine whether there's a trafficking situation. If you suspect something, you can just, notify the appropriate authorities, the appropriate school personnel, and then they would be the ones that will do that investigation. So we don't have time to do an actual group discussion, but if you wanted to screenshot this, this is some group discussions or questions that you could have within your school system or with school personnel on what are some of the ways or scenarios that you may want to address if you notice some of these things come up within the schools in your school settings. So, what can a teacher say to a child if they come to them? Should a teacher approach that child? What should a teacher not discuss with parents, and so forth? These are just some of the ways if you'd like to get more involved with the work of anti-human trafficking and ending human trafficking. You can become a member of the Alliance. You can join one of our working groups, follow us on social media, share what you learned today. And definitely, if you can keep us and our work, as well as all the work of law enforcement and service providers, in your prayers. And then we can also help protect our youth by becoming engaged and having them become engaged with the community through schools and sports and club sports, book clubs, volunteering, after school programs, mentorship programs. These are all great ways for youth to get involved in the community. Many communities also have versions of these that are accessible to low-income families. Especially book clubs can be helpful for girls to become involved with positive role models as well. So we will be sending out some resources as well. We will be sending out this recording, and we will be sending a link to the Stop Trafficking newsletter, who has dedicated its August issue to this topic and has a plethora of additional information and resources for both parents and educators. The other thing I want to mention is that we do have a youth video contest that is coming up. Feel free to contact me at Christine@Alliance to End Human Trafficking, and keep an eye out on our website where we'll be posting some more information in the near future. And this is an opportunity for students to get involved in raising awareness about human trafficking. So they would create a under 3-minute video. First prize is $1,000, second prize is $750, third prize is $500. We also share the videos on social media, and then they can also share it on their social media and hopefully the school accounts as well. And it's a way for students to educate other students on this issue. And we do provide a training video for the students as well.
And don't forget the video of we produced a video, the 19-minute video. Is that going to be part of what they have access to?
I will also be sharing. The Diocese of St. Augustine also produced a very helpful video. It's basically student actors. Do you want to talk about that just for a minute, Ruby?
Sure. It's prevention focused, and it's youth to youth. So it's the grandma has one line, but it's mainly youth to youth, and it hopefully will give kids, equip them to not fall for the promises of traffickers.
Okay, and thank you so much, Ruby. we do have about 5 minutes for questions, and I will go ahead and just share this last quote. It's, never the intention for our children to be for sale. So prevention is key, recognizing is key, and taking action is key. And feel free to put your questions in the Q&A. If you have any questions for myself or Ruby, we are happy to answer them. One of our attendees, Kara, had mentioned that Alicia is actually coming to North Carolina next month to speak at a partner organization event. So that's awesome. She does speaking engagement. So Alicia also, I know she does trainings with airlines and so forth, and has been instrumental in trying to get some legislation passed for victims and survivors as well. What is the name of the diocese that created the video for youth? So that is the Diocese of St. Augustine, and we will be sharing the link to that video. So even if you're not an expert and you want to share this message to the youth, whether it's a youth group at your local church, whether it's at a school group in your public or private school, it's non-secular, or
right.
it's
Not,
not
it's not
religious at
religious.
all. And it's students sharing this information in a very succinct manner. So you can show this 19, 20-minute video, and then you just have a discussion, right? And just ask students questions and engage with them. And we have a lot more resources on our website. There's a lot of great resources on there. We even have additional resources for other organizations on it, listed on our website for parents and educators. And so check it out. I will be sending those links as well. Any questions? Any other questions? We have a few minutes. All right, so we do have a question here. Will you be able to check and improve the audio of the videos you shared on this webinar? Thanks for offering the program. I apologize for the audio. I'm not sure what happened there. But I do apologize that some of the videos, I can share some of the videos that we also have on our YouTube channel that is geared for parents, and which might be helpful for you as well if you wanted to share those as well. So apologies that we had some technical difficulties, but we appreciate your understanding that sometimes those things happen. Are the slides going to be available? If you would like a PDF of our presentation, unfortunately, we can't offer the full presentation with the videos just because it is such a large file with the videos embedded in there. But we are happy to share a PDF of this presentation. And we do have a speakers bureau as well. So if you are interested in being trained on this and would like to get more information or would like to have the slides, feel free to email me at Christine, and I'll put that in the Q&A, Christine at alliance2endhumantrafficking.org. Any other questions? I will just say, Ruby mentioned Jeffrey Epstein, and it's such a huge issue right now. And I actually, one of the things that happened to me was I had almost a Jeffrey Epstein situation, a Ghislaine Maxwell, when I was 17, and I was hanging out at a little beach bar with my friends, and this older woman in her 40s came up to me and said, "Hey, I have a much older friend, but he has a lot of money and he wants to talk to you." And I was a little stubborn at the time. And I said, "Well, he can come talk to me. I'm not going to go talk to him." And, he never did. And I never quite understood why. And it's like we mentioned, it's because they know within 30 seconds of talking to someone, whether it's someone they're going to be easily manipulated or not. Because, I think my response to that question and just showing a little bit of that gumption, they were like, okay, let's move on. You know, if it was someone who was really hurting for money and so forth, then that would have been a target. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Feel free to reach out with me if you have any other questions. And we do offer presentations if we have a speaker in your area, or we're happy to schedule an online presentation at your school. Have a great day.
All right.